Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. I see that we have people from all over the globe joining us today. I've seen people all over the U.S., of course, Canada, the U.K., Mexico, even New Mexico here in the States. So we're glad that you're able to participate with our Value Selling Associates webinar today. My name is Mark Evans. I'm a managing partner with Value Selling, and I'm happy to be with you and share a message that I hope benefits you and really is one of how I became affiliated with Value Selling that began many years ago. I am coming to you from the bluegrass state of Kentucky, very close to downtown Cincinnati. I was reminded recently on a business trip when I flew in and jumped in an Uber car to get to my hotel. And the driver, of course, asked me where I was from, and I told him Kentucky, and I could tell immediately he was not familiar with Kentucky. So here's a couple of quick facts you may or may not know about Kentucky. Our most popular export is probably the bourbon whiskey that's produced here in the state of Kentucky. And like Scotch whiskey only comes from Scotland, bourbon whiskey only is produced and ships out of Kentucky. And then another thing that will actually happen for the 143rd time, the first week in May, is called the Kentucky Derby, one of the most famous thoroughbred horse races that takes place around the world every year. And it's occurred consecutively every year since 1875, if you just think about that. And it's the first leg of the American Triple Crown, so it's a pretty big deal. And the first place prize is a little over $1.4 million. That's a lot of votes for a horse. And put that in perspective, that's more than Tiger Woods ever won in any of his almost 80 PGA Tour golf events. So wherever you are around the world, I realize it's early for some, late for others, in the middle of the business day for some of you. So whether you've got a water, cup of coffee, or if it's after hours, maybe grab a glass of wine or maybe even a little bourbon whiskey, and let's begin our session and talk about how we can create stronger partner level relationships and help you in your own personal run for the roses, which is what they call the Kentucky Derby. So as we look at our agenda ahead of us for the next 55 minutes or so, we're going to review these areas and understand really why people buy from us, and more importantly, why and how we gain their confidence and trust. What is a trusted partner exactly? And I think we would all know, if you've spent much of your career in sales or sales leadership or in some client-facing position, clearly we have to, as an individual salesperson or as an organization, we've got to create and add value to that relationship, right? We're going to talk about what the tenets of that are, and then I'm going to ask each of you to participate with an interactive survey question and give us your idea of what you think those elements might be from a list of 6 options. And then we want to look at what do customers want and expect from us if they're going to operate and see us as a trusted partner to their business. And then I want to step back and look at some information related to what chief sales officers reported to Serious Decisions. If you're not familiar with Serious Decisions, they're a group out of Connecticut, been around since, about 2001, I believe. And they specialize in research and in advisory consulting with firms all over the world, particularly with CSOs related to sales, marketing, and product management. And they've asked CSOs and produced this report every year that talks about chief CSO concerns, as well as a number of other things. And you'll have access to that information at the end of today's session. But I want to talk about some of the concerns they talked about that impact our ability to create trusted partner relationships. And obviously, when we think about the client engagement aspect of dealing with our customers and ultimately creating a trusted partner position, we want to manage that conversation as effectively as possible. We also want to understand from an organization standpoint what a highly effective organizations do to help the client-facing team succeed in this regard. And then as you walk away from today's session, you may come away with some ideas of some things to do differently that I'll talk about. And so you'll want to consider that for your next sales call. And then it might be such that we're suggesting that you do some things differently, and then we'll talk about whether or not that's worth it to you. So let's begin here and ask, why do clients buy from us? And then I'm going to share a short real-life story that I think applies to our topic today. We've all heard that, well, people buy from who they like, right? And if you've been in the sales business very long at all, you probably lost a customer that they liked us, but you know what, they decided to go a different direction for some reason. Kind of an obvious thing to say, well, they buy from people they trust, or people that they've known for a while. You know, they've known them for over time and they've developed this trust. But the reality is that whether it's our company we're representing or the client we're calling on, we want to seek to understand the business issues and problems that they're striving to address to be able to relate our value proposition to them. They want to know that we're able to demonstrate experience and have success in these areas that they're wanting to accomplish, and that we've done that with other clients, that they're not the guinea pig, if you will. And then we have to demonstrate a continuous approach in our client engagement process that we're trying to produce real, tangible, lasting value as a normal part of our business interaction with them. Let me share this story with you. So when I was a previous CSO before joining Value Selling, one of my former very tenured sales representatives, whose name was Chuck, had responsibility for one of our most significant long-standing accounts. However, I had begun to notice their purchase volume trailing off one month, and then the second, and I didn't think too much about it. We had thousands of accounts, but this firm had really never hit that particular list. So I called Chuck to see after this second month, if there was something going on there, if we could help in some way, and just to get a better understanding of the situation. And he said he thought their market was probably just a little soft right now. He would dig into it and let his manager and me know. And then after the third straight month of a dramatic downturn in their business, I decided, you know what, I know the owner, Bob. I think I'll just put a call in to Bob and see if I can run a little interference and understand what's going on. And when I called Bob and told him why I was calling, he told me that they had decided a couple of months ago that after 40 years of what we thought was a true and trusted partnership, that they were going to leave us as their primary supplier for our main competitor. And what he told me is why they made that decision was a real learning experience and changed the course of our firm from then on. He said that Chuck was a great guy, did a good job, but he'd really gotten into this habit of only calling on him as the owner, as the power person, if you will, in the firm, the ultimate decision maker, and not spending enough time with the staff to help them to be successful in their mission. And he said that our firm had really just stopped bringing new ideas in terms of how to help them grow and become more successful. And he said that our firm just wasn't fitting well in anymore with where they wanted to go strategically with their business. As you can imagine, having the long-term relationship that we had had over time, I was pretty shocked. He went on to say that our main competitor's representative had made a point over the course of the prior year or so to do just that. He'd spent a lot of time not only with him, but with his staff. He asked a lot of questions, that he was trying to understand what they were trying to accomplish and to see if he and his firm could help, even though he didn't get much of their sales. So you say he was doing what I would have hoped that our representative was doing. But Bob's firm had known us for a long time. They had liked us and trusted us. However, our firm had stopped seeking to understand how we could partner or help them execute their desired go-to-market strategy. And worse, we opened the door wide open for our primary competitor to do just that. Now, as a CSO, I realized that our team obviously had failed to maintain Bob's trust and confidence. Chuck thought we had a lock on their business, and and he honestly said he thought he had just taken them for granted a little bit, but he didn't realize that any serious concerns existed. And sometimes, as we all know, customers won't tell us where we're going wrong. We have to make sure that we're not. So as a CSO, I realized our organization needed to work smarter and much to ensure that we were doing everything we could to create and maintain stronger relationships with our best accounts, obviously, if we ever expected to earn new ones who trusted us. And most importantly, it was daunting to realize just how much so-called partner-level accounts like Bob's could be so vulnerable, especially how much revenue could potentially be at risk. So I'm going to share with you what we decided would be our litmus test going forward and how we worked to understand our relationship position and the real value of our customers that they saw us creating. And then about the client engagement model that we adopted to transform our standard preparation and approach. Well, it looked like this, the litmus test, if you will, of the trusted partner. Pretty simple, really. We looked for accounts that had stable year-over-year purchase performance, not a one-hit wonder account, if you will, that they just had a major one-time buy, but we may not do business with them again. We look for accounts where we had a stable position, not unexpected surprises, that we weren't always having to fight for their business, where we might win, one cycle, lose the next cycle, where we gained access to all levels of the account, from the lower level of their organization to the top, and then vice versa, that their organization felt like they had gained access, and we made sure that they felt like they had gained access throughout our organization. That we had an interdependent communication relationship. We could say yes, and then when we had to, we could say no, but we had open communication. And then we both were willing to support each other's short and long-term strategic business planning. That means that whether we actively participated or not, if we asked them to help us, perhaps with an ad hoc committee of customers to listen to some of the strategic investments our business planned to make, or if they were going down a certain path, they brought in key suppliers that we wanted to make sure they saw us on that list. So that was the simple litmus test that we utilized to think about whether or not we had trusted partner relationships. And let's talk about this idea of creating added value. So just what are the fundamentals of creating real value? How do we do it? And more importantly, how do we know if we're succeeding at it? And I love this quote: "Strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value," by Albert Einstein. You see, in order to create true trusted client partnerships, we must first develop this as a permanent, I would underscore that, permanent mindset in all of our client engagements. And I'll share this thought too. When we stop selling, quote unquote, and start solving, we put ourselves in a position of no longer taking a client's business for granted potentially. We must start seeking to understand their goals and issues and what the business outcomes that they're trying to achieve in the short and long term. We have to bring regular ideas and solutions to the table of how we're able to potentially help them, and hopefully how our firm is uniquely able to help them. And if they've got immediate business challenges that perhaps don't fall within our company's purview, I've seen some of my most successful sales professionals even roll up their sleeves and help them as much as they can in that regard to research or understand a potential issue, or maybe come up with some supplier ideas for them. But ultimately, they will begin to see us in a different light and how we're focused keenly upon their success. But before we can determine where we're at today, we have to take an honest assessment of our current selling relationship position and understand how to create real lasting value going forward that will transcend and differentiate us from our competitors. So let's talk about these. So as we get into this idea of creating value, I'm going to ask you to participate right now and just select 3 of the 6 options you see on your screen of the ones that you believe are the primary elements to creating sustained client value. These are all good things, but some tend to relate more to the areas that we're able to impact as a provider of value to a client. And then we'll look at the results here in a second. So I'll give you a few seconds. This is probably where we would have some nice soft music for you to listen to, but I won't make you listen to me hum or sing. All right, well, let's see if we have some results in. So you can see here, make it easy to do business. Comes in number 2, increase client competitive edge. Those by far outrate the other ones. Lower client cost, improve life quality, be able and ready and able to meet at any time to support the client needs, and 365 service got no marks. So pretty good actually for the group. So I appreciate your participation. I'm going to share with you here in a moment the 5 tenets of adding value that I've transferred in knowledge to my teams. And we're going to talk about this under the context of the intentional development of the seller's value contribution model. This is a model that I developed a long time ago and kind of used to share this message and put it into context, not only with my sales organizations that I've worked with and had the privilege to work with, but also our customers. And so you can see there that there are 3 simple layers to it. There's the vendor or peddler level, which nobody wants to be in, typically. That's not always a bad thing, but sometimes we go there intentionally. You'll also notice that it's the largest area, right? That's because that's where most sales people reside. The consultative position, and then the trusted partner position. So what do these mean? Now, when we think about these, they can apply to not only the customer and how they view us, but also the level of contribution that we bring to our company, right? So if I go back to my example with Bob, we thought that as a supplier, he saw us as a trusted advisor, when in reality, he saw us as a vendor. He saw us as optional or replaceable, or at least we created that reality for ourselves because we got replaced. And then from our standpoint, we saw him as a trusted partner, but yet we still lost the business. In other words, we weren't aligned there. So when we think about the vendor, consultative, or trusted partner positions, how do we know where we are? And of course, this is a very simple way to evaluate it, but I think it'll give you some basic directional consideration. So when you think about if you're a vendor, you pretty much know that you're informed on an as-needed basis from that account, right? They're not calling asking for our opinion. They might be calling asking for a price, but that doesn't mean that we have an aligned position within that firm. As I said, we're optional or replaceable. If we develop that consultative relationship, now we start to create this two-way street relationship, and we've got good open, they're open to our input and to our opinion, and vice versa. As I say, we start to create more of a preferred position, but we still have a competitive threat. We're not locked into that business. It's only when we think about the trusted partner position that we know we're there if that client wouldn't make a decision without us. If I go back to my example with Bob, before Bob made that decision, ideally, right, he would have called Chuck, he would have called Chuck's manager, he would have called me, or even our CEO and said, hey, you know, I've got some issues here. We're thinking about, you know, the strategy of where we're going, and we're not clear on what you guys are able to do to help us go down this path. As a result, he went down that path on his own. So clearly, we didn't have that relationship. When we do, we know we're creating unique value, and they see that we're critical to their business. In other words, we're a critical part of their value proposition. We become part of the fabric of how they go to market, or we're integral to such a degree that we support that, and vice versa. As a supplier, these are the accounts, the trusted partner accounts, and I referenced the 80-20 assessment below. I'm going to share some more information on that in a second. But when we think about those, you know, those biggest accounts that, you know, they're few in number for most organizations, but they represent, you know, 80-85% of our total revenue. Do we have a trusted partnership with those firms? I just gave you an example of one of our 80/20s. They were a large account. We ultimately got them back, by the way, but they were a large account. And we lost that because we didn't maintain and ensure that we were critical to their business, and we didn't have that open dialogue. So if we look at if we're critical to their business decision or their business approach or not, we need to look at our best accounts and think about it in these terms. If you take the revenue responsibility that you have today, whether you're an individual sales representative or if you're a sales leader, it's a pretty interesting analysis to take your revenue responsibility and determine for yourself how much of it resides in each of these three buckets. I can tell you, and I'm going to share an example with you. We did this in one such situation, and what we learned was it was pretty eye-opening. But how do we impact this? And let's go back to our discussion around creating value. So when we create value and we get this area, the trusted partner, and you see this red triangle come up, it's going to come up a little later in the discussion. The fundamentals of adding value, and you guys did a nice job of this, make it easy to do business, right? If there's anything that they're frustrated with, we don't need to wait for them to pick up the phone and call us because, as we all know, it's probably reached a level of anxiety within their organization that we would rather not occur. So let's be proactive and get on the front end of that. Let's make sure, particularly for 80/20s and customers that we want to have consultative and certainly trusted partner relationships with, we're making it easy for them to do business as much as possible. Are they experiencing any failures in terms of their business relationship with us? That's not necessarily just the products or services that we're selling them. It could be that, you know, it's back office issues. It could be that we're making it easy for them to execute their mission, lower their risk of failure. Obviously, their business, just like ours, they're concerned about their P&L. They're in business to be successful and make money. This doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, we're supposed to find ways to lower our price. We're supposed to find ways to create more value for them. And then ultimately, they want to be more successful. They want to gain share. They want to strengthen, extend, and elevate the value of their brand and their marketplace. How can we partner with them to understand how our firm can help them in that regard so that we continue to strengthen our current seller contribution? A few of you picked improved life quality, and I was pleased to see that. And I sometimes get little fuzzy looks back at me when I talk about improved life quality, but think about this. You know, I imagine a scenario where when our competitor had called Bob and tried to get into his office and then, you know, gain access to his staff, figure out how to get more of their business, which he did. But I wish Bob had said, you know, David, which was the guy's real name, David, I appreciate it. You guys do a great job, but I've got to tell you, you know, your competitor, our current supplier, and you know we've been with them for a long time, they just make it so easy for us to do business. They're an integral part of our value proposition. They partner with us. They work with us to make sure that, you know, they quickly address any issues and concerns or failures that we have. We're more profitable today than our firm's ever been. And as I said, they're part of our value proposition. So I appreciate what you have to offer. You guys do a nice job, but I've got to tell you, this area of my business isn't on my radar today. It's working so well. That's the type of response we want our best customers, and certainly those where we create those trusted partner relationships. That's how we want to respond and minimize, maybe not negate altogether. You always have healthy competition. Your competition will always be going after that account. But we want to try to minimize the impact or potentiality for that competitive threat. So as I say, I've used this model over the years to teach and train, assess how organizations that I've led were doing in terms of adding value, creating stronger client relationships, as well as assessing how we're doing. And let me share with you one such experience and how it went when I was a CSO after being hired by a very large global firm to come in, turn around an underperforming sales organization. And you might have seen an intro I put on LinkedIn recently called my CSO oh crap moment. And here's how it went. So after coming on board, part of my predetermined and personally designed onboarding plan, I began the second week on the job, and for the following 100 days, traveling all over the globe to meet our client-facing team and as many customers as possible. As I recall, the whole process involved about 95 flights and seeing over 250 customers. It was an awesome but exhausting experience, but we learned a lot. And of course, I wanted to meet as many of our best 80/20 accounts as I could, but I also wanted to speak with some of those customers who used to be in that category and had either, dramatically reduced their purchases and in some cases stopped buying altogether to see if we could find some low-hanging fruit. But amazingly, in some of the cases, these accounts wouldn't even meet with us. And you had to ask, well, why not? What have we done to not only lose their business, but what did we lose? What have we done to lose their mere willingness to meet with us? We really must have done something to compromise whatever trust we had before. So how had many of them thought of us as a trusted partner and capable of significant contributions in doing so much business versus turning into a mere vendor firm? And if you remember the litmus test I told you about, the year-over-year purchase volume, and then we had a good open door relationship, interdependence, participating with strategy development. We looked at that group of accounts with all the customers that I met with, and then our entire sales organizations took an honest assessment of these 80/20s because we decided, if we can't protect our best revenue producing accounts, how do we stand to turn this around going forward? So using that criteria, our team concluded that we actually had trusted partner status with only about 5% of our 80/20 customers. 5%. My reaction as a new CSO was, really? Are you kidding me? Seriously? Only 5%? What did that mean? I mean, how vulnerable were we within these so-called best accounts? And it made me think of my old buddy Bob. And more importantly, we knew we had to address it, but how were we going to do that? And as the new chief sales officer, this was my oh crap moment. And you could have literally heard the pin drop in our monthly international business report out call when I shared that stat. And it was a daunting moment for all of us, to be sure, because everyone just assessed those 80/20 accounts in their territory. And so organizations and executives like to talk about, what keeps me up at night. Well, our team had just become joined at the hip at our new what kept us up at night concern. As I said, how could we expect to grow and have continuing confidence in year-over-year revenue growth strategies if so few of our best and critical revenue producing accounts only saw us as preferred and non-essential to their business, or even worse, optional or replaceable? Then one of our best and long-tenured sales professionals made an earthquake statement that immediately got everyone personally committed to changing our individual and collective realities. He said, Mark, ever since you and I visited my 80/20 accounts, and we had those discussions to find out how vital they saw us to their business, it scared the crap out of me. He didn't say crap, I will. And he said, I tell you, if I lost just one of my 80/20 accounts, I could personally stand to lose up to 20% of my annual income. So what can we do to turn the situation around? And as an entire team, we decided right then and there we had to change our reality, work to become indispensably valued by our best customers if we were going to be valued by any customers. And then a few months later, our next international sales and marketing meeting, we rolled out a comprehensive client engagement and opportunity management model that would help us turn our reality around. And when we reported out on our 80/20 trusted partner stat a year later, our reality had changed dramatically and for the better by far. And I'm going to share that update stat with you in a minute. But now let's talk about how we went about changing our approach to shift ourselves up that triangle paradigm and, more importantly, stay there. So what do customers want from us? You know, if they're going to really trust us and make us an integral part of their business, we have to show them that we know them, right? We have to understand their business. They don't want us to come in and just pitch and push our products on them if it doesn't fit into what they're trying to accomplish. And we know we're having success with this when we're not having to sell, but they're buying our solutions. And so when we look at the tenets of what those customers want, they want us to understand their industry. And how do we do that and develop this strong business acumen around this? Well, if they're a public company, it's a little easier. You can read their earnings reports. You can listen to investor calls. You can do that for their competitors to really understand the market that they're dealing with and what's going on with that. If they're private, then it's a little bit more difficult if they're privately held. But you can also look to their industry association, white papers, look at if they participate and attend their industry conventions. Look at the topics that those conventions are dealing with. The board of directors, who are maybe the client that you're calling on, or at least their colleagues, are identifying the key critical issues in that industry that they're dealing with at those conferences to help you understand their industry. In terms of the problems that they're dealing with and the business objectives that they're trying to accomplish for their firm, and obviously that are relatable to the business that you're in, really it's no more complicated than gaining access to the right people in that organization and asking the right questions, listening, probing, making sure we seek to understand, and then working to develop potential solutions that help them, especially focusing on the immediate critical issues. And as I said earlier, even if your firm doesn't, help them where you can, because you can build immediate credibility that way, and they'll know that you really care about their success. But we need to understand what makes them unique. What's their unique value proposition? How do they see themselves going to market and be successful? Are we doing everything from the standpoint of what our firm can offer them to contribute to their long-term success? So above all, we need to be proactive and reliable in our approach and commitments. So as we think about this, now we're beginning to accomplish several important aspects of transcending our relationship, even though you may not realize it. Now we're developing a comprehensive view of our customers. We're understanding better how to contribute to their short and long-term strategy, but more importantly, our client is witnessing a real change in our client engagement approach with them and how we truly want to partner with them. But then you might step back and say, okay, well, does all this matter? I've talked to some sales leaders, even some CEOs in my career that say, hey, we just need to get more in the hopper. We want to focus on the quantitative productivity versus the qualitative performance, meaning quantity over quality. But I want to share with you some statistical information from Serious Decisions that was reported just a few months ago. This was their 2016 annual report, where they asked these chief sales officers to dig into what they thought impeded their abilities to be successful and to create long-term relationships. So the chief sales officers looked at these 5 top challenges that they related to, and you'll notice they all have to do with hitting quota, right? That's what the chief sales officer is responsible for, generating revenue. Whether it was the ideal organizational design and what they needed to do to invest in that, hiring and training the right people, improving sales rep productivity. We're going to focus on these 2 at the bottom that are in red, the buyer-driven process that they thought they needed so that they could bring predictability to their business, and then how to align the overarching client organization. So let's dig into that. As you see here in one of the graphics from Serious Decisions, 65% of CSOs stated that leaders and sellers need to strip away anywhere possible those things that take away from valuable selling time, which I define as everything related to, before, during, after the call. We would really encourage both sellers and sales leadership executives to scrutinize what's occurring today and eliminate waste. And for you sales folks out there, we're going to talk at the end of today's session in terms of your personal ROI related to creator strong and client relationships and how much it's really worth to you. But I think we would all agree we probably get caught up in doing a lot of things throughout our selling day that are non-productive selling related. Some of those things may be administrative requirements that our company needs or asks us to do. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about all the other things, and sometimes it's just wasted time on the phone or doing non-productive research that helps us with that. When we look at the 71% graphic, even more so, CSO stated that they realize a significant gap exists, and they say we're by sellers in their report, but it really applies to organizations too, and how they're ineffective at connecting the value proposition that they offer to the customer's real business issues and their goals. The reality of both of these stats, if you believe them to be true, is then if we're not able to connect that business issue, is that what we're probably doing is going in and pitching and pushing products, and as we established a couple of slides back in terms of what these customers expect from us, if they're going to see us and trust us as a true partner, is that is not what they want from us. As we look at a little bit more information from Serious Decisions, 67% said that they did not have a buyer-aligned sales process, 67%. Without a standardized client engagement framework in place that the client organization can utilize and rely on, that sounds like, we're really hoping that the sales organization just goes out there and figures it out, right? And I normally put that in the SOL category. I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with Toyota Motor Company, one of the great car manufacturing companies in the world. They're widely known for inventing the most efficient manufacturing process, not just for automobiles, but period, in the world. And it incorporates ongoing continuous improvement. It's called Kaizen, K-A-I-Z-E-N. Quite honestly, most manufacturing companies in any industry committed to the pursuit of excellence try to learn, study, and adopt, implement Kaizen. The model for which is where there is no standard, there can be no Kaizen. So if you have no standard buyer-aligned sales process, you have no Kaizen. And while the Kaizen process is probably most notably related to lean manufacturing, the whole idea of the lean process approach of continuous improvement very much also applies to sales and sales management in terms of how we position our client-facing organization to engage customers, to identify, qualify, and advance revenue opportunities, and by all means build long-term trusting relationships. The question is, what does it look like and how do we accomplish it routinely? There's no doubt that when we look at what CESOs reported about the sales conversion and their collective firm's ability to accurately forecast sales performance, that 50% of them said that their firms push the reps to fill up the pipeline without focusing enough on the quality, which ultimately is more critical to their revenue performance than the quantity. So no wonder the win rates that they report for most companies are only at 25%. And then 10% or 90% of firms, if you will, say that they struggle to build a sales forecast that's accurate within 5%, 90-day forecast, have no idea what's going to close or win within a 90-day window. And we would all agree that's pretty poor. So then in terms of client engagement and revenue productivity, what does that Kaizen model look like for you and your organization that you can quickly and dramatically use to improve in these productivity and performance areas? What does a correct engagement approach look like? Let's take a look at that. Well, we refer to it as the value buying process. If you remember, I said when we talked about what customers want from us, it's, they don't want us to sell, we want them to buy. So above all else, they must first understand what's impacting their business issue today. And as I said earlier, that's their P&L. Too often, we don't, and we fall in the trap of updating them on what's new. That is, unless they specifically call us with a problem. And we need to get proactive to ensure that we're understanding those problems. And just imagine how your clients, especially your best clients, will react to this approach when you begin to do this on a regular basis. But then as we understand those where possible, then we can share how our solutions are positioned to help them address those and help them with their desired business outcomes. And hopefully where our solutions are unique. And when they're unique, then we can create that unique, what we call a vision match. But that's how you start to develop that true trusted partner relationship that we referred to back on our seller model. So when we develop that scenario, that's the best position that we're in to be able to build confidence for the long term within that customer. And then and only then is where we talk about the value that we're able to really create for them and demonstrate how we've done that with others. And as we develop that trusted partner relationship and gain that open level of communication and access throughout the firm so that we can interact with the users, the influencers, and ultimately the power decision maker, so that they see that we're credible and we have a means and a plan to drive that solution so that it can be very real and meaningful for them. And a lot of people would look at this and say, hey, I get that, it makes sense, it's very simple, and I can assure you, while it's simple, it's not necessarily just common sense. It doesn't just automatically happen. And remember my CSO moment that I told you about? Let me give you an update of where we got to a year later. So I said that we had realized only 5% of our 80/20 saw us as a trusted partner, meaning a critical part of their business proposition. Well, after we all committed to implementing this new client engagement approach, we reported at our next annual International Sales and Marketing meeting that we had converted just over 40% of these same 80/20 accounts to true trusted partner status. We confirmed that, had that discussion with them. You do the math, that's an 800% improvement inside of 12 months. No doubt we still had a lot of work to do. We all knew we were making the right changes to how we were engaging with our clients and making sure that we were doing everything we can to help them be successful. And as you might imagine, these best accounts of ours realized and had a new appreciation for their partnership with us too, which opened up all types of discussions about expanded share opportunities with many of these, what I would call now really new partners. So you might be asking yourself, okay, Mark, I get that, but how did you do it exactly? Well, said simply, we took control of the sales process. We managed the conversation. If we're going to change how our clients perceive and value our impact on their business, we must first create a highly effective client engagement model approach to deploy routinely, remember Kaizen, and to ensure that it enables us to control the sales process so that we're leveraging the value proposition that we can bring our clients. And it's very easily and capable of being done. So what do I mean by that exactly? Well, let's be honest. This is how conversations typically go. They're all over the place. I call it, it falls into two categories. It's the what's new with you guys or how much does that new thing cost. If your experience is like mine, sales calls, until we learn how to change our reality and control it, typically far too often go one of two ways. They say, hey, I don't have a lot of time. I know, I forgot you were coming. So what's new with you guys? And we immediately jump into the solutions and start pitching and pushing and telling them about products before we really even understand if they're applicable to their firm. Or the how much is, hey, I read about this new solution you guys came out with. Sounds really interesting. And I see you guys are going after your competitor in that, and I'm familiar with theirs. How much does yours cost compared to it? And of course, what do? We tell them. We go right to the value of it without establishing, well, yeah, I'd love to tell you about that, but let me help you understand why we brought that product out to begin with. Here's what we were hearing from our clients and what we're seeing in the market. Are you experiencing those things too? And here are the problems that some of the clients that we've been able to help we're dealing with. Are you guys, is that familiar? Are you guys dealing with that? Well, yeah, absolutely we are. Well, here's how we developed our solution uniquely to be able to address that. Then we want to talk about the value and ultimately the price. So we take control of the standard engagement process and we learn those skills Doesn't happen overnight, but it's easily learnable so that we create this organizational discipline and create that standard Kaizen approach to how we engage that client, and then take control to create and really advance that opportunity. So you might say, okay, so what's it really look like? Well, pretty simply, they become straight lines. It's simple, it's easy. As I said, it's conversations that we would predetermine this roadmap of how we want that call to go. We can have it right there on our iPad, we can have it in our portfolio, or even on your smartphone, but we want to design the right conversation so whether we're with a user or maybe with a power person, it could be tailored specifically. And by the way, if we're inside salespeople who maybe aren't generating sales, or maybe even if they are generating final sales opportunities, this same approach can help them to create a situation with a client where we're still identifying those issues, understanding their problems, but then we flip it out to the outside sales team to drive the solution home. But until we actually manage the conversation with our buyers, they can be all over the place, and the conversation can go in a million different directions. So it can be very difficult for a salesperson to bring that conversation back on track, and this tool that we utilize at Value Selling, called the Value Prompter, is the way that we help organizations do that. But what about from the broader organizational standpoint? What gets in the way of us being successful? Because it's not just the individual seller that's out meeting with the client that drives that trusted partner relationship. Well, highly effective organizations wrap their entire value proposition around the sales and marketing outreach to customers. And within marketing, I include product management. So when we know this to be true, we know that we have an aligned proposition to take to the marketplace, and we're kind of all singing off the same sheet of music. We're going to look at it in a minute and see what serious decisions learned from CSOs as to whether or not that typically happens. Because here's what my experience has been over my career is we spend a lot of time and money to bring the sales team in for sales meetings, to train them on new or an improved product or service offerings, without teaching them how to connect to the buyer's needs. What we do is we focus on the how, but not as importantly the why. Most organizations focus on features, advantages, benefits, competitive comparisons. We give the team talking points, and then we hope and pray they go out and they're able to drive that value proposition with our customer. And trust me, in every organization that uses this approach today, that's what we, in today's modern vernacular, call a huge fail. But let's talk about what the CSOs saw here. Well, the CSOs said only 7% of organizations, and these are thousands and thousands of CSOs, they said in their instances only 7% of their organizations had that service level alignment between sales and marketing. Only 24% even use the same metrics to measure and manage their success and define success within their organization. And then only 14% even use the same technologies and platforms to gain and push information to and from the market. So do we really think our organization is positioned to help our client-facing team create trusted partnerships if we're this misaligned? Another report, and you'll get a copy of this or have access to it at the end of today's session, from Salesforce.com that I read just a few weeks ago, and this is from their second annual report on the state of sales, where they reported out after interviewing 3,000 sales professionals. Those sales professionals, 68% of them said it was absolutely critical or very important to have a single view of the customer and success metrics to define and measure such across departments and roles. 79% of high-performing sales reps stated that their organization had worked to create a highly effective alignment. But the reality was only 17% of the sales teams rated that their organization had a single view as outstanding. So where it did exist, it made a significant difference, right? But in most cases, it didn't exist. So what do? And this is what I discovered when I was a CSO, and how my team became highly effective at using this to help them address our what kept us up at night moment. Value selling is simply a set of principles and tools, I would say Kaizen, if you will, to support a connected engagement process that develops the value of your firm's solution from the customer's perspective. It's really a conversational framework model that helps the salesperson better engage with the client so they can understand the value of the solution from their perspective. It's all about how you engage, not how you push your value proposition, but to better understand what the customer values and therefore articulate with the customer what the value of your solution would be in their world. So when I have this discussion with my clients, many come back and say, okay, I get the engagement piece, but what about that business acumen piece you talked about? How do we get better at that? And while I won't spend a lot of time on that today, we do offer an area here where we help our clients in terms of executive speak and learning how to gain access to those decision makers. And that's where you're dealing in the C-suite or savvy mom and pop business owners, maybe senior level strategic accounts people, or even how to deal effectively with decisions by committee. How to read and interpret financial reports and create productive research that helps you with highly impactful engagement, and then create those executive profiles and then be effective in consultative engagement. So that's a broader discussion for another time, but here's what I've shared a great deal about today so far. What a trusted partner is, and understanding where we are positioned today, and especially with our best top 80/20 accounts, how and why to create meaningful value, how and why it's imperative for you and or your team to learn how to manage that conversation, how and why to create alignment across the key functions across your client-facing organization, and how we help our clients accomplish these things quickly so that they're sustainable and scalable, and most important, connected to the opportunity qualification process to ensure that the team becomes better at hitting quotas. It's not just about conversations or engagement, but as a CSO that I always consider myself, it's about engaging in a highly effective manner to create revenue opportunities so that we can help our salespeople get better at that qualification, advancing, and closing them. Because at the end of the day, it's all about revenue, right? It's all about your individual quota that you're responsible for, and it's all about your potential earnings, income. So, okay, then after all that, how can you improve on your very next call when we walk out of this session? Let's talk about a few things quickly. So we've got to do our homework. We've got to do the research on our company that we talked about, the client. And you'd be amazed at how much more prepared and confident you will be going into that call if you do that homework. Be prepared with questions to ask. Create that conversational roadmap that we talked about. Predetermine what that is going to be before you walk into the door, or my counsel would be, don't go in. Always begin with the business issues and problems that are addressing that firm, obviously related to the business proposition that you and your firm are able to help with, and hopefully uniquely. Work diligently to gain access to all levels of user influence and power. There's another level of influence too called saboteur. In some cases, you can imagine, where you're trying to get your foot into a competitively held account, there will be people that will work against you. That's another learning skill. So gain access to all levels, as we talk about, and then understand your firm's criticality to their success. Where are you on that seller contribution model? You've got to be honest in where you're at today to know how to go forward. And then separate yourself professionally by putting your meetings, putting them in writing, what the intention of the meeting, the expectation of the meeting, and then the follow-up of the meeting. And your clients will begin to see you in a different way. So as I said, here's a parting thought. Now you might be sitting there saying, okay, Mark, how much time is it going to take me to do this research and create this conversational roadmap? I'm already pretty busy. I don't know if I have time for that. But my question is, how can you afford not to do that? Can you reevaluate how you're really spending your time in your day and spend your time to best position yourself to have a highly impactful client engagement and put yourself in the best position to create that trusted relationship? Well, let's do the math. Let's say that you're all very successful people. Let's say you want to make $250,000 and you had a great work-life balance. You're going to take 4 weeks of vacation, and you're going to spend 48 weeks a year invested in your earnings potential, and you're going to work 50 really hard hours a week. So if you divide that 250 by 48 by 50, or the 250 by 48 by 50, you'll find out that your net value per hour is $104, and that's before benefits. If you're a sales leader, you'd add the benefits to that. And if you think about it, there aren't too many professionals in your life that you deal with where you pay over $100 an hour. But let's say you spend an average 1 hour to prep for the call, to get ready, to get your notes, to review what happened before, make sure you got the information you need. You're going to have an hour involved to get there and get to the next call, so there's an hour of travel involved. And then let's say you spend on average an hour with the call. That's $312. That's just one call. Let's say you make 3 calls on average per day. And then let's say that you do that at least 4 days a week. That's $3,740. Now, if you're only shooting to make $125,000 a year, that's only $1,872. So let's say you do this. Before that week starts, you're going to sit down. If your goal is $250,000 a year, you're going to write your boss a check and tell him to hold this for you for $3,740 of your own money, out of your own account. And you're going to say, you're going to pay me back at the end of the year. I think you see where I'm going. But you got to ask yourself, what's your payback? How are we spending our time? I can tell you that nothing's more important than the client engagement. And I recently listened to a quarter-end investor earnings call for a very large global management consulting firm where the CSO clearly stated that regardless of everything his organization was doing to engage the market, he said nothing is more critical than when our consultants meet face-to-face with a client. In other words, your engagement is everything. So trust me, I can assure you in your organization, if you focus on these things, some realities will begin to occur, and you'll realize that you're changing your reality with your client. So we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to just, we've had some questions come in. I've got time, I think, maybe for 1 or 2, but here's a question. It said, how did your customers react to your sales reps taking a totally different engagement approach? Was it odd at first? That's really a great question. And actually, I'll tell you, it was completely seamless and transparent. You see, our calls became more conversational in nature because our team learned to do that. It was a little rusty at first, but we got good at it. And if anything, we learned that our average sales calls began to last longer because our customers were doing most of the talking. And as we all know, we love to hear ourselves talk, which is probably about what you're thinking of me right now. So I tell you what, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I want to do some housekeeping before we end. I promise to answer any questions or comments that you've submitted into our session manager today after today's call. But let me bring today's session to a close. So as I said earlier, all of the information today will be available to you at no charge, at least that we have access to on valueselling.com. The slides that you saw, you can listen to a rebroadcast of this webinar if you'd like, as well as the salesforce.com information. We also put a link for you to Serious Decisions if you want to access that information. So feel free to check us out at valueselling.com. If you're a sales leader, or I would suggest if it's part of your future development intentions to become one at some point, plan to join us next month when the president and CEO of Value Selling, Julie Thomas, and Rocky Lagrone, who's the director of sales for Objective Management Group, mostly known as OMG, which is a pioneer in the sales assessment industry, talk about how to hire sales superstars. I think you'll find that to be a very informing session. And then be sure to follow us at valuesellingassociates.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and hey, we even tweet. And then finally, I would say thank you for your time today. We had a lot of people join in. I'm so appreciative of you joining us today. And if you have any questions for me, you can shoot me an email or shoot me a call, and I'll be glad to help you at any time. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your day or your morning or your evening, depending on where you are. And thanks for your time today with Value Selling Associates.